PostCovid Entrepreneurship, we have among us the prestigious upright Outstanding International Student Award winner, Dr. Arun Surendran. He is the Strategic Director and Principal of Trinity College of Engineering. He is the founder director of ADCY.io Cybersecurity Solutions. He is also the Honorary Fellow for Robotics for Kerala Startup Mission and Senior Fellow of Defence Research and Studies think tank. With over 16 plus honors in diverse fields, this exemplary man has also authored books like The Startup Habit and Seven C's of Entrepreneurship. We are truly honored to have you with us today, sir. I would like to bring it to the notice of the audience that any stunt of mischief bound to disturb the keynote of the speaker will not be tolerated. Please keep your cameras and microphones switched off. All the questions will be addressed at the end of the keynote, hence the audience is requested to put them in the Q&A box for sir to address them later. Without any further ado, I would like to hand over the stage to Mr. Sundaram.
Thank you so much, Jagriti. Thank you, Zach and the IEEE SRM IST team for the very warm welcome. This talk about CONCEPTO I heard almost a month back from Zach. I was quite excited to be part of this wonderful event. Thank you for having me, and I hope in the next 1 hour or so we will be able to share quite a few ideas, and I would like to learn as much from you as I am sharing the experience that I have in this particular topic. Now, what we should recognize right at the outset, like Jagrati mentioned about the post-COVID scenario, we should recognize quite seriously that we belong to perhaps the top 1%, if not the 0.1% of Indian privileged population. With the education that we receive, especially the high quality engineering education that most of you are receiving. And therefore, it's imperative that we take our responsibility towards the society very seriously. But what we can do, equipped with all this knowledge that we have received, the skills we have learned, the wonderful campus life that has given us a lot of soft skills, because this is wonderful. No, you guys are organizing this thing virtually and getting a bunch of speakers from around the world to come and talk to you so that everybody gets to gain. And these qualities will come in extremely handy as you go ahead with the world. So this again is a mutually learning experience, and I would like to hear from all of you about the ideas that you have about innovation and entrepreneurship, while I will start off by sharing a few of the ideas that I have in my mind based on my experience. So as it was mentioned in that rather generous introduction, I do play a lot of different roles, and in all the different roles, it's basically innovation that we are trying to spur. At Trinity College of Engineering, when I came back to India in 2011, and by 2012, I had took over as the strategic director of the college. One of the things that bothered me was that there was a lot of push from the Kerala government for entrepreneurship. There was a lot of push at the government level for innovation, but somehow it was not translated to on-campus activity. Okay, it was not that students did not want to start up. Of course, just like you all are, even at that time, 8 years ago, the students were enthusiastic in their third year, fourth year to try stuff, but somehow something was being lost in translation. It was not coming out practically, and even today, people keep ruining about Indians not being there in the Nobel Prize list. When is the Indian Google going to come up? When is the Indian Apple going to come up? And so on. So it was that gap that I noticed. And one of the reasons I understood was that there seems to have been a last link failure. By last link failure, what I mean is, okay, somebody like me, and at that time there was the person known as the father of business incubation in Kerala, Dr. KCC Nair, who set up the technology business incubator at Technopark Trivandrum, and then which became the Kerala Startup Mission. Now he used to go around campuses. I used to go around campuses, give motivational speeches about entrepreneurship and so on. But the moment we leave, okay, the students are all excited, but they have to go back to the classes and they listen to their professors. So obviously, professors are the most important people in their life, not just because of the internal marks, but also because those are the people they look up to as guides for their engineering professional journey, engineering career. And somehow that's where the gap existed. Because the professors would always be talking about placements, about going to companies, because the professors themselves did not have experience running companies or directly consulting for companies. So the gap that existed was that the professors were not practicing engineers. So this was something that was very starkly different from when you consider the other branch of professional education. As you know, engineering and medical fields are considered to be professional education because they equip you to handle your career without supervision. But what happens in a medical college? Right? Whenever we hear of medical college, our minds rush to the image of a hospital. We are not looking at it as a college. But that's also a place where the next generation of doctors are being trained by practicing doctors of the previous generation. So it's this gap. So I was uh, committed to creating a campus where a generation of practicing engineers would be training the next generation of engineers. So I wanted to run an engineering college where innovation and entrepreneurship happen on ground with highly qualified MTech PhD holders in engineering, and they are trying out in their own field, in their own specialization, how to set up commercial companies, how to set up R&D companies and run with them. And this would be proper education for the students. So that's what continues to keep Trinity different and unique in this space of engineering colleges. And that's where I have gained most of my experience, hard-earned experience, learning mostly and I think almost completely from failures, because success teaches you very little, as you will understand as you grow older. It's the failures that hold the lessons that are of immense value, and which is what I would like to share with you. So let's take up this very interesting topic, the art of innovation and post-COVID entrepreneurship. Clearly, it's divided into two segments. So the first segment that I would like to address is the art of innovation. Now, that again has those two words which need to be understood. Right? Why are we calling it the art and not the science? It's quite an important and interesting difference to address. Why are we not saying the science of innovation? Why are we calling it the art of innovation? Now, are these two really different? Are scientists, do they tend to be artistic in their pursuits? Are artists quite scientific in their approach? Is it a false dichotomy? Is it something that, C.P. Snow addressed way back 50, 70 years ago when he talked about the two civilizations, as in humanities and then science, having been diverged quite drastically? Does that really exist? So what is it that fundamentally, when we say somebody has a scientific mind or something is scientific fact, I think we are appealing to a certain amount of objectivity and independence of that fact beyond what people might think about it. So it's a scientific fact is not dependent on people's opinion, right? It's not like it has to be supported by belief. It remains a fact, whether you believe or not. And it remains a fact that can be tested and experimented. And anybody anywhere in the world should be able to recreate that experiment and refine it, run more things on it. So that's where the scientific part comes from. But art in the artistic world always implies that there is an audience. There is somebody else. There is the artist, there is the created art, and there is the viewer, the onlooker, the person who appreciates or enjoys or critically views that art. So it always implies there is a human element involved. So that's where I see innovation as well. Because innovation critically means there needs to be a people element. We cannot say I have innovated something and then nobody else is able to understand it, nobody else is able to use it. That doesn't mean the innovation is successful at all, or whether it's an invention and innovation at all. So that's where the art part comes in. I hope I'm getting across clearly what I'm trying to convey. And then we look at the second word, which is innovation. So I wonder if most of you have heard of definitions of innovation. What it is. Is it invention? Is it a slightly tweaked invention? Is it something drastically different? Is it something new? Mostly, people think, okay, have you innovated? It's an innovative idea, means it's a novel idea. But are there other factors? Now, I'm pretty sure as students of SRM, most of you are familiar with this very small college in the United States called MIT. Okay, it's an institute of technology. It's almost a square mile of area, but in that square mile of area, they have managed to create entrepreneurs and innovators who have gone on to create wealth in trillions of dollars. So how is it that one campus is able to accomplish it? There is a lot we can learn from their model of innovation and entrepreneurship. How is it that? So without getting into much details, and if you are interested, there is a wonderful, wonderful book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which is taught by Bill Ollett, who heads the MIT's School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and it's available online. And there is also an Eastern Economy edition textbook. So please check out that book. And very much in the first chapter of the book, Bill Ollett talks about a definition for innovation that was given by Ed Roberts, who was his predecessor. And true to the MIT spirit, it's a mathematical formula. Okay, so Ed Roberts' formula was innovation is equal to invention plus commercialization. Right? Innovation is equal to invention plus commercialization. So there needs to be an addition of commercial element to the invention. Now Bill Ollett comes along and says, see that this equation is wrong. Not per se wrong. He says it can be improved by changing the plus sign into a multiplication sign. So he says innovation is invention multiplied by commercialization. Now what difference will it make? We invented zero, right? India invented zero. So we can try putting zero in any of this. According to Ed Roberts' plus sign, even if commercialization is zero, it says invention is equal to innovation. So there is some innovation. But what Bill Ollett has done is, if it is zero, then it's done. There is no innovation. It needs both these components. There needs to be some invention, there needs to be some commercialization. Now, looking at it from the Indian vantage point, especially coming from Kerala, where we are very suspicious of commercial interests. And even in India, I think culturally, we look at things that are free to be of a higher quality, judging from the spirituality point of view, where some of the lessons in life, again, are free. And commercial means some sort of, popularity, maybe not high quality, something that everybody gets on and so on. So maybe if you have a problem, and all of us have certain emotional resonances with words, right? And these are things we picked up from our cultural context, from our childhood. So if commercial is a word that has negative connotations for you, that is somehow making it difficult for you to get on to appreciate it, then I would suggest change it to social impact. Okay. This need not be a completely charitable social impact, but an impact in the society. So if you have an invention, then it should be multiplied by a social impact, which is another way of calling a market. Now, you may charge it, you may not charge it, but an invention, to be called a successful innovation, has to have this element that it helped people, it made a difference in their life, or it improved something. So I hope that part is pretty clear about how I am going about defining it, and I've obviously borrowed everything from Bill Ollett at this point, except tweaking around the commercial element part. So with that clarity, we can look at the kind of innovations. Okay, people, there are two types. One is the product. That's in you come up as an engineer with something new. That's a new product. It didn't exist before, as in it existed in other forms. Or it could be a process innovation, some new way of doing things. Right? And always there would be predecessors. You are not pulling things out of thin air. You will be making connections that people earlier couldn't make because of your unique background, because of your unique exposures. You'll be able to pull things together and create something novel out of it. That's a great innovation then. Or you would be steadily improving something till it becomes unrecognizable from the previous one, or it hits a brand new market. And there will always be, Facebook per se did not innovate a lot from the previous social media that was there. Google, there were a lot of search engines, no? So one of the other mistakes that students usually have, which I have learned from experience, is that they want something to be absolutely new. It shouldn't have. So whenever they are having an idea, they're very hard on themselves by looking at Google and realizing, oh, this person has already done it. So many such products are there. That's a mistake. They may have done. A lot of people get similar ideas at the same time. No, idea is actually quite cheap. Anybody can daydream and come up with an idea. Even if it's a fantastic idea, there would be at least a dozen people around the world who have similar background who might have thought of it. The difference lies in how you execute it, how you build on it, how you flesh it out, how you make it rich. And in that, all the other qualities of a good innovator would come in. What is the team that you have? What is the ecosystem that you have that is going to help you make this into a wonderful, viable product or service? So that's a bit of a digression from what I was trying to say. So one is this kind of product. It could also be a service. And the other is a process, some new way of doing things. Okay, for example, in Kerala, one of the grand innovations that happened a couple of decades, I think 2-3 decades ago, was the coconut breaking machine. So till then we had this conventional thing, which you must have seen, using a hacker. But now we have a device that is kept on the ground, and you pop the coconut on it and it breaks apart. Quite simple. Can use your legs, much more power, doesn't tax you much. That's a simple innovation. That's a different process along with the product. In business, we have new ways of doing things. Somebody would have had different steps, but you come along with a much smoother trajectory of doing this. So innovation is something that's all around us. People usually, especially students, they think, oh, I don't have an innovative mind. I have never innovated something. You have innovated. Or you have these novel ideas. You have pulled together. Think of the excuses that you have given to your professors, okay, about late submissions, about not writing an exam well, or the excuses that you have given yourself for not studying as hard as you should have studied. Correct? You would have come up with rather innovative things. And the other innovations that we usually have, the Indian kitchen is the kitchen of innovations. No other civilization has developed this kind of massive array of foods, right? And look at the way we process stuff. I mean, we can take rice and simply cook rice and that's it. But look at the kind of dishes we come up with in rice. There are sweet ones, sour ones, breakfast ones, lunch ones, dinner ones, for this occasion, that occasion. And with a few spices here and there, just by sprinkling, a totally different flavor comes up. So it's in our blood. It's in our blood. It's just that we didn't tap it in a professional fashion, or maybe we never tied it to our education. Can we innovate? Because I think we have this whole bookish system of education where we learn stuff only for the exam. We are told that's the milestone we should cover, and only when you start getting into a job, oh my God, I have to apply all these things now. And then the generations are called unemployable because they don't have the skills to apply and things. That's because we are stuck with the books and the exam thing. And those are holy books. Nobody wants to go and change things in them because then the question paper has to be changed and so on. So that's probably the misleading part. For example, when all of you, I'm pretty sure, have come across something or the other of Shakespeare in your school. But I'm sure nobody told you that we are reading Shakespeare now, we are learning Shakespeare now, so that in future, when you are 30, 40 and you have leisure time, you can really enjoy wonderful writings of Shakespeare. Our purpose at that time was somehow to by heart the Julius Caesar speech. This would come, that annotation would come, and so on. Nobody told us mathematics was being taught so that we could model things, right? In our lives, the unknowns, we can gladly call them X and Y and look at the differential equation for the variations. Nobody told us there are two distinct ways of looking at life on this planet. One is quantities as continuous, which is calculus, and one is quantities as discrete, which is matrices and things like that. So this practical application of education somehow got messed up, which is what holds us back with these beliefs that we are not great innovators. So I would like to, I'm basically an aerospace engineer. My BTech master's and PhD was in aerospace engineering, but I did my PhD dissertation in financial modeling. Okay, so from my aerospace background, I would like to briefly share the story of Wright Brothers. Not because I couldn't find a story in India. Of course, ISRO, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and the story of ISRO. If you read Aravamudan's great book is there. And that's another thing I would suggest all of you should read the story of ISRO, because it will make you aware of humble beginnings. It's very important, because till COVID came in, we lived in a very flashy environment of big events, flashy presentations and, interviews and gala dinners and this and that and so on. Now everything has gone online, but still none of those big fabulousness of the past, where we were introduced to innovators and entrepreneurs like superstars, great influencers. Very little talk was being given about their humble beginnings. I'm sure that Jeff Bezos' photograph was floating around about him sitting at a desk and how Amazon started off. But that again is pretty confusing. So whenever a new entrepreneur or innovator comes along, they want to be like Elon Musk. They want to be already a celebrity. They forget that these are a bunch of young men and women who sat around, struggled for years and years before something happened. So ISRO, if you look at the old tales of ISRO, and they started off in a very small fishing hamlet here in Trivandrum, how by the side of a church they started. And you should see the photographs of Abdul Kalam and Aravamudan all sitting in their, that inner t-shirt and struggling to make those sounding rockets by themselves. And look at where ISRO is today. So humble beginnings, but steady growth. Always have big dreams, wings of fire, as he said. But beginnings will always be humble. When you were a baby, you were so helpless, always pooping around and crying for milk, and that's it. Nobody thought you would be SRM final year, third year students at that time. But here you are now, waiting to be innovators and changers of the society, leaders of tomorrow. So change will come, but be aware of the humble beginnings, give them the credit. So I would like to share Wright Brothers' story, because it has a lot of lessons in terms of innovation, right? Firstly, they had a sister, which not many people are aware of. And she was the most studious one, and she had a steady job. She worked as a teacher. These two brothers were not very regular at school, but they were excellent students. As in, whenever they went, they made very good marks. But their dad was never very insistent on being very punctual, because he knew they were always spending their time productively, even if they were at home. He was a bishop, right? He was a bishop, but he had books by the biggest atheists of their time also in the library. They had a fantastic home library. So these boys were always exposed to a wide variety of ideas. And then it was at the time of a great adversity, when Orwell was down with typhoid and Wilbur was looking after him, that they decided to pursue this whole flight. Is powered human flight possible? People were gliding all along. And there are interesting things about how Wilbur wanted to go to college, but he suffered from an ice hockey accident, as in, which was not an accident, it was a fight between kids at that age, and he got badly mashed in, and the shape of his face changed, which affected him psychologically as well. So that's a great adversity from which probably without it we wouldn't have had the airplane. So they, later on in their life, when they are, again, one is sick in bed and the other one is taking care of them, that's when they start thinking, how can we put our time, our qualities to better use? Can we tackle this problem of flight? Which was an insurmountable problem at that time. Centuries of people have tried, right from Icarus, Leonardo da Vinci, there were the Chinese parachutes, a lot of gliders. Otto von Lilienthal was there, whose writings really influenced them. And there is this beautiful letter by Wilbur Wright sent to the Smithsonian, and you can find that letter online. Smithsonian was the largest library in the US. And he writes saying, send us all the information available about human flight attempts and birds. All the research, because we are trying to do something. So that's like core R&D, dedicating your life for something. And do you know what their first business was? They tried to run a printing press. And then, as you might know, there were bicycle manufacturers, right? Wright bicycles. And it was very successful business, bicycle business. But that gave them two things. One is a mechanical acumen of working with things, machinery, building bicycles, help them build things. And the second was they figured before anybody else that balance was important in flight, just as it is in bicycle. And they also figured that it's not just the device, the pilot is an essential component. Human powered flight doesn't mean it's a passenger and the flight takes off. They figured it has to be powered and controlled. So control systems were also important. And then years of working, almost a decade of working. They lived in Ohio, which did not have steady winds. They wanted a place with steady winds where they could test out the new wing layouts. They figured that most of the data available on wing structures were wrong because they did the experiments themselves. So they had to devise new kind of structures, the aerofoil structures. And they again emailed the US Meteorological Society asking for which is the place in US that has steady winds around the year so that we can go and test this. And they got the answer that it's Kitty Hawk in Carolina. And Kitty Hawk was just a place with a few dozen fishermen. That's it. And they couldn't even fish all the year round. It was just an abandoned, a very remote place. And they traveled all the way there, camped there, and started running these experiments. And there are wonderful descriptions of how they would have to sleep with just their nose exposed because of the mosquitoes. And that's something everybody can relate to, right? With Chennai, Trivandrum, wherever we are. If you're going to do open air experiments at night, that's a similar problem that they faced. So there were hardships. It's not like they sat around in a cushy, comfortable American home, the suburban images of which we are familiar with, and did something. And one of the things that really touched me is that Lilienthal, the German glider with whom they were familiar with his story, he lost his life. He had a brother. So this was like two brothers there and Wright brothers here. So the Wright brothers, from the beginning, decide that they will never glide together. Do you see the depth and the commitment and the awareness in that decision? So that if one of us dies, and they're very much aware that this could be a fatal endeavor, and they're saying, let it be just one. In case the worst happens, let the other guy be around so that the knowledge, the effort, and everything else is preserved. So this is what I'm describing to you is one of the greatest innovation and the struggles that led to it. And then once they were successfully, so very few people were there watching these mad brothers. USA as such did not even accept that they had achieved this because US was investing heavily on this other Samuel Langley's projects. And people like Chanute were moving this way and that way, trying to cater to both, trying to steal credit from this part and that part and so on. So US was investing in Langley. They couldn't believe two brothers with $5,000 total budget could pull this off because they had to build everything, including the engine, right? So more than United States, the interest came from France and UK. And the commercialization first begins there for the Wright brothers. And then they come back. And then they run through this whole legal battle trying to win. That's a totally different story. That's the entrepreneurial part of the story. But what I want you to take away from this is it's not easy. It demands commitment. But it needs to be enjoyable. Now, obviously, this is why I mentioned about us being a privileged part of the society, of our great nation. Because we can afford to take some risks, to do some innovations. Our struggles will be of a different kind. It's not like we are going to run out of food or something. So we can, only thing is maybe the comfort of a steady job. And I want to mention one of my favorite authors, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote this wonderful book called Black Swan, which is the unexpected events, right? He also worked in the stock market. After Black Swan, he has written a book called Skin in the Game, as in, people who are preaching should have a skin in the game so that there is any validity. One of my favorite statements from Nassim Nicholas Taleb is there are 3 deadly addictions, okay? 3 fatal addictions to which we can succumb. One is heroin, the drug, As you know, there is no rehab and possibilities are very few. The second is something that South Indians should be very familiar with. It's called carbohydrates, right? Carbohydrates will eventually kill you, but they are a great addiction. They are such a lovely kind of food. And the third one is the most important. The third one, which he says, is a monthly salary. A monthly salary is indeed a deadly addiction because once you are hooked onto it, you really need it every month. And you would go to great lengths to ensure that you are getting it every month. And naturally, just like an addict, you will need a bigger and bigger fix every month, if possible, to maintain that level of satisfaction or a high. But that's not the life of an entrepreneur. That's not the life of an innovator. An innovator or entrepreneur has to be comfortable with unsteady cash flow and has to be comfortable with 24/7 working hours. It's not that 9 to 5 we do something and then with that money we do something called life. This is the life, right? We are innovating, we are working as a team, we enjoy creating new things, trying out new things. We enjoy what people call failure because we call it experiments. And all of them are successful, even if because they teach us a lot of things. So that's a change in mindset, which at your age would be much easier to come before you get, the societal commitments and other kinds of financial liabilities, which will eventually come to you. After which, taking this risk will look like a much bigger risk. So at this point is what you can think and get inspired by innovators around the world and entrepreneurs. So that's pretty much the story of Wright Brothers, or the glimpses of the story that I want to mention. And also, since I mentioned the risk taking and the job satisfaction and things, when you have an innovative idea, when you are trying to innovate, there is always this generative and discriminative networks within you, right? Something generates a new idea and then the discriminative network, just like in AI, it will tell what is all wrong with this, why you shouldn't try this, where all the risks are lying. So it's an interplay that we should be comfortable with, right? So when we visualize, there is another part of us which will tell us why the execution is not going to be very difficult. So we have to learn to separate these two parts of our personalities, where the dreamer is there and the doer is there. The dreamer shouldn't overwhelm the doer shouldn't overwhelm the dreamer. That's the balance, like the Wright Brothers bicycle, that you need. You need both sides, right? So keep that in mind. And there needs to be a phase difference. If you look at the big companies, that have successfully innovated and have stayed in business, they always have the separation of groups. There is the franchise group, which is working and providing the steady revenue stream for the company. But there is the loan short group, which are experimenting with incredible stuff. Apple had a business that was running, but there was a small group that was doing the iPod, the iPad, the iPhone. Those are all coming from small groups who are not disturbed by the other activities. It's not like the other team is coming and saying, look at those guys, they're wasting their time simply drawing things. We don't know if that product will be successful or not. Why don't we invest more in things that are already making money? At the same time, the other group shouldn't say, see, this is just clerical labor stuff, which you can mechanize it. Why are these people there? We need both parts. We need to make sure that there is something that is steady, that is engaging the market, but at the same time, some place where the innovation is not disturbed. It should be there in every campus. No, I'm sure your campus has innovation centers and entrepreneurship development centers. In Kerala, we have this thing called IEDCs, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Center, where we try out new things. But of course, the other part is the big significant chunk of studying and writing the exams and doing the labs and everything is there. But there is this other powerhouse where loon shot ideas. Can you imagine? People, when in India we talk of innovation, we always talk about solving the garbage problem, increasing food security, how can education be improved. We are always from the social thrust, right? But the commercially large successes in India, Facebook, TikTok, what problem did they solve? Can you imagine if somebody came up with the idea of TikTok and took it to a competition, an innovation judgment competition where the old professors are sitting trying to judge you, and you say, no, I have come up with a product where you can make 30-second videos, add some filters, and then, yeah, just send it to across the world. This is my great idea. So they would say, this is, what is the use? What problem have you solved? And so on. So maybe there is no problem, but such ideas will only come in young minds. That's why I said I have a lot to learn from you. So because once you start growing older, you are focused more on the problems that need to be solved. You are not looking at how life can be made more enjoyable, which is a totally separate segment of thinking, which equally produces commercially great products, as you can see. And the four digital giants that currently probably run the entire industrial world right now. So that's that part. The second half of this talk, which won't be half, it will be much shorter because we discussed a lot about entrepreneurship as well, is about post-COVID entrepreneurship. What happened in the COVID crisis? Okay, what did we learn? How did we change? Few things are very, very clear. One is we found global and local to go hand in hand. We realized that global talent can be hired and they can be part of the team sitting anywhere in the world if the business is of a digital kind. And we also realized that we need, if it's a non-digital business, the essentials, we need a local thrust. If we keep on going on shutdowns, if we have trouble traveling and transporting and logistics issues, we need to produce things locally. So there is a vocal for local, like our Prime Minister said, but that even more severe, local in the sense down to your neighborhood or your immediate city. And there is the global thrust that you can make things, your intellectual property can be used by anybody, anywhere in the world, your intellectual acumen can be used. So that opens up a wide spectrum. The other thing, the monthly salary addiction that I talked about, COVID crisis laid bare the uncertainty in jobs, right? We know that crores of jobs have been lost, millions in the US, millions, they're slowly going to come back. We don't know the exact economic impact. That will be clear to us only maybe 2 years down the lane. But people have started realizing they need some kind of at least a backup, something that I can do by myself or me and a small team can do in case I lose my job in the big corporation. So that's where your personal entrepreneurship thrust comes in. And, here entrepreneurship is being used very loosely because most of the entrepreneurs in India are self-employed people. So we call that aspect as well proprietorship, where you have a skill, you use it, and that's your own business. But as engineers, as highly qualified engineers, we should be thinking of wealth creators, team builders, job providers. That's the duty, that's the responsibility that we need to take up, where we can minimize the uncertainty of other people's lives. Whether we innovate so that come what crisis, people who are dependent on us are provided job, work, salary, because they have a lower risk-taking appetite. Can we innovate? We need to innovate that time. So that's where the post-COVID entrepreneurship, the local dependence on resources, the possibility of remote work, and frugality, right? We would like to reduce the amount of efforts. You are all the generation which will solve the climate crisis for us. So frugally, without wasting much of resources, can we provide the highest quality? Because right now, only global standards. There is nothing like this is the Indian standard, this is the Tamil Nadu standard or anyone. Whatever you execute, it has to be acceptable around the world. So really high quality, locally created innovations are required. So that's where I see the major change. So with those words, I would like to open up a discussion. I would like to hear from you, and maybe if there are some questions which I can answer, I can go in that direction as well. So thank you so much for listening to me. I hope I have provided some triggers for thinking in your very young, very fresh, great brains. Thank you. Please do ask questions.
Yes, it was a highly informative session, and we are sure to have learned a great deal this evening. And now I open the floor to questions from the audience. Uh, yes. If the audience has any questions, please put them up in the question and answer Q&A box where we can read them to sir.
Yeah, I think we should tell AirMeet to have that typing thing to show up. See,
Yes.
that's an innovation that they really need. Otherwise, there's a lot of uncertainty about whether a question.
Yes. There is one question. Taking your business fully remote after the pandemic. What are your views on that?
Yeah, see, am part of this cybersecurity company called ADSI, Advanced Cybersecurity, ADCY.io. We have gone completely remote. All our staff are working from home. The office has been kept shut, and that worked beautifully. But that's the nature of the business. We run only vulnerability assessment and penetration testing services. We do some kind of ISO services as well. The college has been a hybrid now because the classes have pre-produced videos that are sent the previous day. Then the faculty have interactive sessions which are live online, and then the faculty do come to college because we need the collaborative effort. We need it's the teachers sitting together and discussing with each other that makes the biggest difference to the student. So that part we do have, and of course the admissions are going on, so we need to see the new students as well. So that's a hybrid. So some businesses can go completely remote, but something like my Dudwala cannot. He needs to be around.
Yes.
Do you think
Yes.
the government should help SMEs? There are two schools of thought in that. One is when will you stop helping? Small and medium scale. So what the government can do is what something like a good college campus can do is to create an ecosystem. Is to create an ecosystem where a competent person, somebody who wants to try this out, can is most welcome to come and try without creating any impediments. But the nature of business is such that there will be failures and you learn from failures. The government shouldn't interfere and support when there are failures, right? You need the coach. The coach is there, but the coach doesn't run along and try to shoot the other runners when the final race happens or try to prop up a particular runner. So, all the coaching, all the environment needs to be provided by the government by all means, all the loans and so on. But later on, the business is on its own. Otherwise, we'll end up with a competition of government supported business versus private business, which is already there in education.
Yes.
So such things in the long run is not sustainable. That's my view. Sir, you told everyone is innovator. Till now, I am raised by bookish knowledge. What should I do to find the innovator within me? Uh, you see, you thought of that question. Right? To find where did that question come from? Can we ask that question in a separate way, in a different way, right? Nikhil. So I think that's the name because
Yes. Yes.
yeah. Okay. So Nikhil, the very act of asking questions is what you should continue, right? And you have expressed that you have a pretty good awareness of yourself and a lot of humility. Humility is the greatest virtue of a businessman. If you see the top of the line businessmen, they may appear very cocky and self-conscious and narcissistic on stage, but to run a team, humility, because you need to hire people smarter than yourself. So you have the awareness already that probably you have only bookish knowledge. That's the great first part. But you went ahead and asked the question. So now framing questions, asking more questions. Like what are the problems that students around me are facing? What are the problem maybe my mother is facing in the kitchen? What is the problem of my big greatest friend at this point? Or somebody you see on the street. Try to see if your mind with the knowledge can provide a solution for that. That would be a beginning. And then try to execute it, okay? Not just think and dream it and put it on paper or something. try to help a fellow human being if we can relieve their suffering at least a little bit or make the life easier for them, which is what, engineers, we are the laziest bunch, and the laziness is an asset because we didn't want to go walking anywhere. We thought wheels are good, bullock carts are nice, but then managing all the bullocks are a big difficult problem. So cycle, but then cycling is too difficult. So motor, put a motor there. Motorcycle has come, but the sun is there, so put a car canopy, so car four wheeler will come. We are trying to make life easier and easier, but obviously there are fallouts like pollution and manufacturing and other things. So don't worry about it. Bookish knowledge is not a bad thing. We need that knowledge. Only from it can new ideas spring. You need a bed from which it can come. Okay, so I hope that's a bit of my answer. The next question.
Can you tell something about how students can learn more about the art of innovation, and how should we use the situation to the best of our advantage?
Your generation is extraordinarily lucky in the sense you are not limited by the people immediately available around you. You have unlimited access to anybody in the world. Okay, so bookish knowledge, books have been written by people. So if you can go directly talk to those people, that's great. So now, how many of you use social media, your Facebook account or your LinkedIn account, to actually talk to other students doing the same branch of studies across the world? Do you have Korean friends, Singapore friends, American friends, Europe? We don't, right? We have never looked at it that way. So we need to. That's one way you will learn art of innovation. What are the projects being done in Indonesia? What are the projects being done by BTech students or the equivalent of BTech in Japan? Can we learn something from them? Sky is the limit. At least start looking at Kerala. No, if you're sitting in Chennai, what are the projects that are happening in Kerala? What's happening in Coimbatore if you're in Chennai? This kind of connect. And the second thing is, I come from a generation where we had a lot of restriction about who was the teacher, making a great determination of how much we got interested in a particular subject. So even in school, if you had a tremendous mathematics teacher but a lousy English teacher, you will end up with great love for mathematics and then not so much English. This has been overcome now because the greatest teachers for each of the subjects, the men and women who are led by pure passion and immersion for any subject, are there for free on YouTube. And we are all monkeys. Let's all agree to that, no matter how good looking we might be. So monkey see, monkey do, right? If you want to go see a monkey, a human being who is so deeply passionate about propulsion systems of jet engines, they are there online. When you look at them, you will start mirroring them. That kind of passion will come through. How can somebody be so interested in this thing? I thought it was a very boring subject, but that person can bring it alive for you. And that's where you will start learning. So you will see all the passionate innovators are available, all the passionate teachers are available. Make use of them. Watch those videos, interact with them. All of them will respond. If you ask good questions, they will all respond. I have done this from my student days, so that I am confessing to you. Whenever I read a good book, if the author's email ID is available behind the book, which nowadays it's always there, or you can find them on LinkedIn, please connect and tell them you read the book. Obviously, give them some proof that you have read the book by quoting some part of it. They will really love it because I also write books. I know if somebody comes up to me and says, you have written this, I would be very happy to communicate. So that would trigger a lot of ideas in your mind that would connect you because, I keep forgetting who said this, but you are only the average of 5 people you keep closest to yourself. That satsang is not just a spiritual thing. Your friendships determine who you are together with in college, you are together with in your workplace, their moods, the words they use, their interests will always influence you. You will be like their average. So try to connect with the best in the world. Okay. Zach, when a crisis, especially like the one we are facing right now, has significant financial impact, how can you adapt your business to reduce costs, both in short and medium term? Yeah. The biggest cost in obviously digital businesses is the salaries, right? You are paid very highly, these engineers who support you. So one of the misunderstanding that people have is, let us lay a lot of people off, let's fire them. But when you're a big company, you can afford to do that because you get fresh, young, fourth year, eager freshers coming in who have done good projects. We can hire them for really cheap and let go of the guy who has worked for 2.5 years. But then the freshers should also have the intelligence to figure out that this fate might come to me in 2.5 years. So it depends on how well I perform in the job and what all skills I can manage and whether I can be an entrepreneur myself, an innovator by myself. So cost reduction. One of the massive things that happened is that you don't need those flashy offices anymore. No, huge rentals, electricity consumption, the transportation, they have all gone away. This is why companies are happily keeping people at home, sending them furniture so that you can have a great home office to sit there, because major cost reduction happened. And secondly, that can reflect if you talk to your employees, if you talk to the team, they are in the same crisis. They understand why it is important to have the team together, have the workplace together, and so on. So it won't become something like a salary cut. It'll be like a team decision about how this can be forwarded. And now it's a good time for a lot of new investment to come in. See, the financial impact, none of the money that existed in the world has gone anywhere, right? It's still there. Nobody burned any cash. All this is there. It is sitting with some people because they are looking at the uncertainty. Massive funding has happened to startups in the last 2-3 months, if you look at it. Because instead of putting it in the bank, instead of putting it in the traditionally comfortable investment areas, the big money is now looking at novel ideas, innovations. So funding is something, mergers and understandings and agreements. These are the way forward. So that's the medium term, short term planning that happens. There is investment available. So look at restructuring your company and your whole workplace so that that can come into you. I hope that answers the question. What all steps can be taken to ensure well-being of employee and safety of productive assets in the event of crisis? What is well-being? You see, well-being is not a catch-all phrase, right? Harshita, my well-being may not be your well-being or Jagrati's well-being. Some people want a little bit of pressure to perform very well. The Israeli model of innovation under crisis. Some people want deadlines. Some people want structure. Some people are well if nobody tells them what to do. Just, they are given the task, a big overview, and then just leave them be. So we need to communicate to each employee, to each team member, and find out what would keep them at the best to work to their maximum potential. And the safety is again a fallout of these things. If it is physical assets, then nowadays you have all the IoT monitoring and remote monitoring and things like that. All kinds of triggers are there with your, the tolerance limits and everything, safety factors being factored in. But regarding well-being, now we have the potential to talk about the individual, right? There is this wonderful book by Todd Ross called The End of Average. Okay. Let me digress into a story. I think we have a little bit of time. Is that okay, Jagrati? Yes. See, after the second or during the Second World War, United States started losing a lot of its aircraft in trial flights, practice flights, sorties. They went out and wouldn't come back. The pilots were excellent, brilliant people. The aircrafts were in very good condition, but somehow these planes were being lost. So, by chance, because of the luck of the world, there was a statistician becoming assigned to this project of trying to figure out what was happening. Now, he learned that the American aircraft cockpits were being designed for somebody called the average American pilot. So, how do you figure out who is the average American pilot? Okay, so you take the height of all the pilots and divide it by the number of pilots. You take the arm length of all the pilots, the leg length and so on. This individual doesn't exist. So none of the cockpits are customized for the pilot. So come a crisis when they are in a kind of maneuver that needs a lot of presence of mind, blood rushing and so on, they have issues getting to the controls or handling things. And what he suggested at that time is now available in every single car. It's called the adjustable seat. You sit in there, you can raise it, you can move it back and forward, right? That's it. Now, Todd Ross is asking us, where is the adjustable seat in the classroom? Why should we come and teach 40 of you, 60 of you the exact same thing in the exact same way and then put the exact same question paper when all of you are so different? Do we have the capacity now with technology? Absolutely yes. We have the capacity to measure when maybe, okay, one of you likes to study between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Some of you is comfortable waking up at 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. Why can't they get the lessons then? Why do we insist on this 9 o'clock, 4 o'clock, you come here, each hour is 1 hour long, 50 minutes long, everybody do the same assignment? If we customize it, we should customize it because now it's possible. Then the business model changes, but each individual student will be much more productive. So their well-being will be very different. And I think that's where all the edtech companies are aspiring to make a change. And eventually it will come. We'll see it definitely in the next 10 years. Okay. So next is how can one ensure suitable financing and stable cash reserve? There is no magic bullet. We don't know. Because we were all relying on something, certain things were very certain and sure, and it all disappeared. So we don't know next virus, next asteroid, next meteor, we don't know. Some uncertainty will always be there. Suitable people to work with. Okay, forget about physical entities, forget about financial entities. Rely on people because people people will die unexpectedly. That's there for sure. But the networks that you create, they make a big difference. So if it's a nameless face behind a brand name that is providing you something, there is high chance that there will be no support come a crisis. But if it's a smiling face or at least a frowny face, it's a face, human face, which speaks a common language, there is a lot more appeal that can be done. So that's how I would look at it. Are there any platform where we might get started or post our ideas to connect? Oh yes, Facebook, post it and you'll see how it goes viral. LinkedIn is much better in terms of professional, at least because anonymous people won't come up or fake IDs are far fewer there. But look at Kickstarter and the other crowdfunding, crowdsourced places where innovations are being put up for funding, and you'll see the variety of people who are taking care of that. Any tips on how do we go from an initial idea state to a full-fledged team working on it? It's the toughest part to determine whether an idea is worth the effort and whether or not should we proceed with it. Any tips in analyzing? Yes. If you cannot find a client, right, somebody who will take money out of their pocket and give you for whatever it is that you're trying to do, or somebody who would be so thrilled, let's forget about money being involved, so thrilled that you created this. If you cannot find such a person, don't do this. If you can find such a person, or if you can at least imagine such a person to be definitely out there, maybe 50 years down the lane, then do it. You know this Licklider story, Joseph Licklider, who headed the ARPA, the American Research in that wing, the invention of the internet in 1960s, okay, when barely the computers were collapsing after you send L and O and you were not able to complete that, the log in had to be there. He wrote a memo to participants of the intergalactic computer network. So that's the kind of vision that propels these things, okay? When two computers between two universities couldn't talk, the man is talking about intergalactic computer network. So maybe the product that you have doesn't have a market now, but will have a market in future. So that's why don't be hard on yourself, but you should be able to visualize such a consumer. But then how do you convince anybody to invest it if it's just a visualization from your part, right? For investment to come, you have to show a real market. And you need to start with a small segment that will surely, for example, if you have a tech company, start with only the entrance coaching people might come for it. Only BTech final year need it. And then you start expanding from there once you're successful with that market. These things take time. And the team we form, people will change, circumstances will change. So maybe the team will fall apart. Maybe new team members will come. Those things are all part of the journey. Each journey is going to be unique. So please get started. If you don't get started, we'll always be talking theory, like the bookish knowledge part we discussed. Okay. How will demand disruption impact businesses and how to recover from it? Yes, a wonderful question. Uh, a demand for something went away, but demand for something else has come up, right? Always. For example, the demand for physical events have gone. A lot of event managers are now completely out of job. There is nothing. No events are being done. All the marriage planning, all those things have considerable loss of their market. But look at the video platforms that have come up, right? I'm sure if Air Meet can innovate for an Indian wedding, try to digitize every single aspect. We have all these ceremonies. Different. Right now, they are only live streaming it. Just we are just getting a. It's just a videograph that's coming. But what if there could be some involvement? What if you could give gifts online, real time, the bride and the groom watching, right? So there will be new demands when something else went up. For example, a lot of people who were doing mobile phone businesses have started selling food products now because that demand has gone up now. You need high quality organic produce to come in, not so much mobile phone repair and things like that. So somewhere else the demand has come, and that's where the versatility of the entrepreneur comes in. Like, we are not concerned about, oh, this is the only business I'll do and things like that. We should innovate there as well. So we innovate our business model. So that's the spirit with which we can go. We don't know when we will recover, but can we make changes? Okay, how to make business model resilient enough to cover from the impact of crisis? Okay, I think that was the same question.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So this brings us to the end of the question and answer session.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule to enlighten us and help us understand the topic better. Thank you for being such an excellent audience. Your patience and cooperation has helped us conduct this webinar smoothly. I would also like to thank the organizing team for their splendid efforts and zealousness they put in making this happen. Concluding today's session, I urge everyone to be available for more of upcoming webinars we have in store for everybody. The next webinar will start at 6 p.m. So I hope everybody sticks with us until then and joins us for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.